I am a co-founder of Restore Health and Wellness Institute with my dear friend and co-host, Dr. Mariela Diocares. And we are both very happy to be with you today, representing Restore Health and Wellness Institute. Our very special guest speaker is Dr. Cammie Connor. Dr. Cammie serves as Director of Counseling and Prevention Services at Harry Stowe State University, with over 15 years dedicated to mental health, higher education, and secondary education. Her leadership is in capacity of hosting statewide symposiums, professional developments, and workshops. Dr. Connor has a PhD in higher education administration from State Louis University. She has a master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Friends University and a BS in business administration from Lincoln University. Dr. Connor has a broad range of experience in research and education in presenting and facilitating professional developments and workshops in mental health, trauma-informed care, and intergenerational cycles of trauma. Her strong passion is trauma, and she has afforded her great opportunities to present within many school districts, conferences around the world, and opportunity to research and educate around trauma-informed care. And today, Dr. Connor continues sharing her knowledge and experience in this important topic. Thank you so much, Dr. Connor, for making the time in your busy schedule to be with us today, and we appreciate that. And now I'm going to ask Dr. Mariela Diocares to please give us some information about the dynamics of this webinar.
Okay, so thank you so much everyone for joining us, and we are still having people come in, so we'll let them in as they're joining us. One of the things that I do want to bring up, and I know that our audience is pretty varied, so I'm not going to assume that everyone here works in mental health or has some knowledge of mental health. Because this can be a triggering topic, we do want to let you know in this moment, during this webinar, we are not going to be providing any crisis services. If you feel that you are triggered and you feel that you do need some additional help, we do encourage you to either call the crisis line or to call the suicide prevention lifeline. Yvonne, if you could put those numbers in the chat, that would be amazing. If not, you can also Google it. But please, if you are feeling triggered to the point where this topic is too much, please take care of yourself, take care of your mental health. It's okay to log off. We are recording this. Tomorrow we will be providing a link to this webinar. So if tomorrow's a better day to watch it, that's completely fine. I will not take it personally, I promise you. But definitely look out for your mental health. Hopefully you did do at least a little bit of self-care before logging in. I know I did. I tried to take a little tiny 15-minute nap before logging on because I knew that this topic can be pretty difficult. The other thing that we also will ask is, because this is going to be extremely interactive, we definitely want all participants to participate. Please do so in the chat. We do have the chat open for everybody to share. As always, please just be respectful. Even if you don't agree what is said in the chat, still please be respectful. And if you feel like you want to share, just raise your hand and we can call up on you, because like I said, we definitely want everyone to participate. If you haven't already, in the chat, if you could let us know where you're joining us from. And we're also doing a mental health check-in. So in this moment, this very, very moment, thank you, Yvonne, if you could just let us know, what is your mental health like? How are you feeling? Just hopefully this is a safe space for you to be able to share. Sound good? Okay, so mental health check-in. I'll tell you how I'm doing right this minute. I'm actually very excited to be working with Dr. Connor and Yvonne. I feel that they are amazing people and they both have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, and hopefully some of that knowledge is also going to be shared today. But I think that these are actually two of the very best people to have this conversation with. And this is really what is going to be just a conversation, very organic conversation of what it means to whether you work with people that engage in self harm or whether you yourself um, participate or do self harm. I think that this is a topic that is very much needed. And it's a very uncomfortable topic to talk about. Even those of us that have been trained in mental health, it can get uncomfortable. What do you think, Dr. Connor?
Absolutely. First of all, thank everyone for joining us this evening. It's a little late for me, but that's good. I'm so excited to be in the midst of just looking at some of you that are joining us. I can't wait to hear some of your conversations, kind of like what Dr. Mariella said. This is some hard conversations, but we definitely want to be able to hear what you have to say and meet you where you're at. So my emotional well-being for this evening is I'm feeling a little youthful. I just left my son. He visited me for for his spring break. So I had the opportunity to kind of refill that empty nest. And we did some shopping and eating. And so I'm feeling very kind of back to being that mother again, even though we're so ready to get rid of it when it's at the necessary time we need for it, but it's always good to have it back. And so I'm feeling pretty youthful today.
Nice. I
Yeah.
haven't heard that word in a while. So thank you. So we have people that are feeling energized, self-fulfilled, optimistic, feeling good. Oh, someone's on spring break. A little jealous. Spending extra time relaxing with my puppy today. That's Lori. That's awesome. Enjoy it. Yes. Feeling fantastic. Gratitude. Dominant emotions are optimism, compassion, and energetic. Trust. Ooh, trust is a big one. Thank you for sharing that. And delegation is a great thing. Yes, it is. Thank God for delegation. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. Yeah, if you could continue to check in just where you are in this very moment. Um, and whatever your emotion is, go ahead and if you feel comfortable sharing it, let's talk about it. Let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about what self-harm is. Dr. Connor and Yvonne and I were talking a little bit of about what I guess could be considered traditional self-harm can look like, and then what are some other aspects that could be considered self-harm that maybe we haven't thought about as self-harm quite yet. Dr. Connor, you were mentioning some things that we've been trained as clinicians to look out for when it does come to self-harm.
Yes. First we want to be able to look at self-harm. The definition of self-harm is when we hurt ourselves as a way to be able to deal with difficult feelings. It could even be painful memories. It could be anything that's overwhelming. And so it's different experiences that people will gravitate towards to see what they can do to kind of start to put those emotions back into perspective when they're numb. And so it kind of brings a way of how they feel. So when we look at that first statement, our retention statement, for me, I think it's important for someone to kind of learn your triggers. And I think if you kind of use that retention as your statement, if you're learning your triggers, then you're starting to express or being able to distract yourself from that self-harm. That's kind of that's the end result that you want to eventually start to work towards.
Absolutely. Just out of curiosity, and if you guys, hopefully you're all familiar, at the bottom of your screen, there is a reaction button. Just if you could just let us know with a thumbs up or raise of hands, how many people that are joining us today actually work in the mental health field? Or even put it in the chat. Okay, so we have a few. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, this is an amazing audience. Thank you so much. So let's get right into this. And we're definitely going to ask you to participate in the chat as well. What could be a good self retention statement? If we were doing this with a client that we work with, or even if we were doing this for ourselves, because again, I don't know if there are people joining us today that do self harm. What could be, in your experience, Dr. Connor, a good self retention statement?
Dr. Maria, are you asking me? Are you waiting?
Yes, yes. I'm
Oh,
looking at, yeah.
yeah.
And participants, if you could let us know in the chat as well, what would be a good retention statement?
And I think while they're working on this, one of the things when we're looking at self-harm, sometimes self-harm is something that's really hard to put into words. And so even when we start to try to figure out what is our retention statement, we have to kind of look at what are some of our invisible thoughts that we have. Some of those thoughts sometimes are internalized and we don't know what to do. And so sometimes that's why we react in self-harm. And so I think this is a great statement, because once we can identify the statement, then we can really start to recognize, what do I need to do to keep myself safe?
Absolutely. Well, and another thing that you and I were talking about, Dr. Connor, was um, we've been trained as clinicians to look for self harm as cutting. So maybe they are visible signs of self harm. But we've also talked about what are some invisible signs of self harm. And for those in the audience, if you would like to participate, let us know what would you say are some invisible or maybe not as well known signs of self harm. We were talking before we started today's session about, I don't know if you guys remember when the pandemic started, that we were all on edge. Some of us are still on edge, very anxious, very stressed out about this pandemic. We knew very little about it, but there were people out there that were purposefully going out and having COVID parties to try and get COVID. They were going around licking things where there was a high probability of getting COVID. And so we were talking about, a lot of times when we have those kind of high levels of anxiety, high levels of stress, high levels of unknowns, sometimes we engage in behaviors that help us kind of just, whatever this feeling is going to be, I want to feel it now. I don't want it to be out of control. I want to be able to get some of my control. And so many times those self-harming behaviors can look as self-care behaviors when in reality they're actually self-harming behaviors. And I'm a huge advocate for self-care. However, there are people that take self-care to the extreme, right? We can say, for instance, exercise is a huge way to self-care, right? But if we're taking it to the extreme, then it becomes a very unhealthy behavior, and that can actually turn into a self-harming behavior. So again, something to think about. Self-deflecting statements. Yes, absolutely. That is a huge one. That is a huge way that we do self-harm, that people self-harm. What are some other ways that people self-harm? In your experience, Dr. Connor?
So some of the example that you just gave is, it's something very different, but we're all kind of in this new normal now. And so, when we're used to looking at the cuts and the bruises and, the small blood stains that we see on our shirts, are we still seeing that today, or are we seeing self-harm in a whole different setting? And so just kind of wanting to look at what are some of the physical signs that are new to you all that you're seeing, or what are some of the things that you would like, that you need from us? Because self-harm today comes in so many different forms, especially with COVID, being present. I work in higher education, and, the students not having that social being as their support system as they set alone now. So we're looking at depression, we're looking at their moods. And so what do they focus on? They become numbed. And so they do sit in their rooms. And so self-harm can start to look, just becoming withdrawn, from everything and being in their rooms and not wanting to socialize, which used to be a huge aspect. So I would like to see, is there anything else that you all have seen that is a little unusual as far as physical or emotional signs to self-harm?
So we have some participants that have said starving themselves, eating too much, drugs and alcohol, absolutely. Food restriction, binging, risky sex, yes, unprotected sex especially.
Mhm.
Deal with trauma daily, virtual reality escapism. Yes, that's actually a huge one.
Those are good. Yeah.
That's
I
very good.
mean, unfortunately, a lot of the things that you're mentioning, I mean, we are I know somebody just said self-sabotaging unhealthy relationships. We have so many of our adolescents, our young adults that are coming into, as a clinician, that are coming in and they just feel empty. They don't have that support system like they used to. And so with COVID being a huge factor, it's becoming a result of trauma. And just like someone mentioned, and so now they're dealing with not only, sitting alone and not having that social support, but now they're dealing with loved ones, passing away. And so they're taking on all these different events that is causing them to have more lasting adverse effects, which causing now more, I call it the non-suicidal self injury. And so it's not so much as the suicidal part, which is one of the highest rates, it's third in our society, but now they're looking at how do I feel? And so one of those examples is a lot of our adolescents and our young adults are turning to tattooing as a way to feel. And it's, so it's also a huge example of self-harm. And where it's unknown, you can get confused of what it is, but it's also allowing them to get some sense of satisfaction from it. And so they might repeat that over and over.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Piercing
And
too.
yes.
Thing is very, yes.
We also have those social media challenges that I don't know if you guys have seen in the news. The latest one is, I believe they're like little gel shells that people are shooting at other people with like those Nerf guns. I saw it on my news feed. Yes, or bees.
Or beats.
Yes, yes. Um, to me, it's surprising, absolutely surprising. And I have an 11-year-old, and call me a little paranoid, but I definitely want to see what she's doing on her iPad, or any type, or even on her phone. She's not allowed to have any social media, but I don't even want to think about what that's going to be like when and if I allow her to get on social media. Um, just like everything, social media can be a huge positive, but then again, when there are unhealthy aspects to it, right? One way to actually escape reality is to get into social media. I mean, how many of these influencers, seem to have the perfect life?
Mm-hmm.
And so that definitely does nothing for our mental health when we're seeing that, they have these fabulous lives and maybe we don't have that same lifestyle as well. So definitely something to think about. There are different ways, when we're talking about virtual reality escapism. I think about Black Mirror. I don't know how many of you guys have seen Black Mirror, but that's perfect, right? You just, every time you watch an episode of that, it's like a little too close to reality, of whether it could happen or not. So if you haven't seen Black Mirror, and you're feeling like you need a wild night, how about it?
Right.
I have not heard about Brave New World. Is that a show? What is that?
Yeah, I've
James,
never heard of that as well.
yeah. James, if you could share with us, whether in the chat. Oh, it's a novel.
Okay.
Interesting. Guess what I'm going to be putting on my reading list.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes. I know we talk a lot about, another thing that's really high is everyone is experiencing a high rate of anxiety.
Yeah,
And due to, the anxiety, sometimes people just want to feel a little bit more calm. And, when we talk about, self-care and we talk about, we're getting into more of the meditations, but self-harm is also coming in a way for a person to feel more calm. And it starts to be a little bit more if they continue to self-harm and then they kind of overextend that self-harm, then they become worried and then they become overwhelmed. And so then based off of that, you start to see self-harm even play out even more. So we have to be careful with, being able to be present in the moment of what some of our, especially our adolescents and some of our young adults, because they are turning to self-harm just to feel, just to kind of feel a little bit more calm. And sometimes they look at that as a way to just get through the day, get through the night, or get through their classes.
absolutely. Well, and let's talk a little bit about trauma. Not that we're not going to go through the coping plan, we will. But let's talk a little bit about trauma, and especially, you know, COVID is still on everyone's mind. What's happening in the world can be very traumatic, absolutely. So, in your experience, Dr. Connor, self harm and trauma, let's talk about the correlation. Let's talk about what that can look like.
Well, with our trauma, trauma comes in a form of, we have three different types of trauma. We have the acute trauma, we have the complex trauma. And so we're looking at, if you're looking at one incident that can happen, we look at what are the series of, the traumas that can lead into so many different factors of what plays out into these behaviors. And so if we look at one incident, if we just take, for example, what's going on now is COVID. And COVID has really stricken our society into not being able to meet the needs and have the sense of normalcy that we normally have. So it starts to kind of put a daunting task on our mental well-being, as well as our physical well-being, our social, our emotional, and even our spiritual. Even when we look at the spiritual aspect, a lot of people that's used to going out and attending churches, that's taken away from them. So there's lasting adverse effects to trauma, and it will linger on. And if we don't find some healthy way to cope with it, what happens is we start to find something that kind of makes us feel a little bit more calmer and under control. And so then that's when some of those other behaviors come into play. If you're dealing with physical, sexual, emotional abuse, even we kind of spoke a little earlier about war, the death, disasters. I mean, our society has taken on so many deaths due to COVID-19. So it's not anything that that we are in so many different facets of how are we handling this. And so so we are turning to a lot of things due to depression. And like I said, our anxiety is at an all-time high. And I think for our younger people, just to be able to break away, and even our adults, all ages, they're turning to, how do I unnumb myself at this moment? And so it allows us to shift back to some of the self acts of cutting and so forth, just to kind of relieve some of that tension.
Absolutely. And I
Mhm.
think it's important to also think about that even professionals in the mental health field, and I know that I've mentioned this in other conversations as well, it's very, it's difficult because we're all going through this trauma together at the same time. So
Mhm.
it's not like you know, at least I wasn't during my schooling taught, hey, if there's ever a pandemic, these are some things that you can do specific to
Right.
the pandemic. It's more like now we're all going through this pandemic. You know, I still need to show up for the people that I work with. I still need to show up for the people that need me to show up. And do I feel like doing that every day? No, absolutely not. There are some days where I'm dealing with some of my own stuff, and I really need to scrape deep in order to be able to have that motivation, in order to be able to have that energy to say, you know what, I can be here for you. Um,
Right.
so absolutely, trauma plays a huge, huge role in that. You know, this traumatic event, COVID, the war that's currently going on, these are all traumas that we're all experiencing together, and there is no textbook, there is no intervention specific to those things to as clinicians to be able to help clients.
Yes. I think, when we look at trauma, one of the first things to do is we want to recognize, what's going on in our space. And then as for self-harm, in order to have we want to kind of reason with ourselves. And so when you're able to reason with yourself, you're becoming more aware of what are some of the things that I can do to put in place when I'm not self-harming. And so one of the things that I always give to my clients is you can actually write down, I self-harm because it makes me what? And then so once you recognize that space of why you're doing what you're doing, then you can start to put more focus on it. And then what are some of the coping skills that we can use? And off of our wellness sheet, we speak about the coping skills.
Absolutely.
And so coping skills is how do we release energy in more of a positive way versus more in a self-harmful way.
Right.
And so how do you distract your urges when you're wanting to self-harm? So you have to replace that self-harm with something. And so at the time you have to have it ready. So as you feel in these spaces that you're showing now with our self-harm coping plan, what are some, when you get those urges, what is something that you can replace that urge with? And then you have to be ready to actually take that, the difference of what you're going to use instead of the self-harm and be able to try that out. And then eventually, once you replace it, then you do it over and over. And then you're starting to eventually start to move away from the self-harm because you're replacing it with something that's becoming more fulfilling.
Nora brought up, and she actually put it in the chat, and thank you so much, Nora. By the way, James, I'm loving how you're participating, so please don't stop.
Right.
You're not being too chatty, you're being chatty enough, so no worries. But Nora's saying, so it's naming the elephant in the room to be able to work through it. Yes, absolutely. That is exactly what it is. It's normalizing those conversations around this topic. So it doesn't become a taboo topic. So it moves from being a taboo topic to being a, you know what, let's talk about it. Because the only way that we're going to be able to process, work through it, name it, identify it, whatever we need, provide support for it, is to talk about it. So yes, let's talk about it. Identifying what is going to keep myself safe right now, that's huge, because that's also a way to ground yourself of in this very moment. And that's why we were asking in this very moment what your mental health looks like, because we need to ground ourselves. We need to be in this moment to say, okay, what are some steps? What do I need in order to feel safe, in order to stay safe, in order to, I'm not going to worry about what's going to happen in an hour. I'm going to worry about what I can do right this minute. Because if I think about what could or what I need to do in an hour, that can become very overwhelming. And then the anxiety comes right back in.
So basically, Dr. Mariela, you can find out what are the situations that make you want to self-harm. And so once you find out what those situations, then how can you avoid it? So what are the things that you can actually put in place that you can actually start to avoid that. So if it's something that you normally go to when you're at home and you're watching television, just as an example, if it's something sitting right there, then that's something that you want to remove. So you have identified the situation, you need to now remove it. And then as I said earlier, then what are you replacing it with so that you can be available to actually pick up something different that's going to allow you to make sure that yourself is safe. And so, so I think that's a first step.
I think that you also brought up a really good point. Whenever I work with clients, regardless of what they're coming in for, it's basically identifying what's the purpose of the behavior, right? What is
Yes.
that behavior helping me do? Is it helping me cope? Is it helping me do something? Is it helping me, whatever the behavior might be, but what is the purpose of the behavior? Is it a self-soothing mechanism? Because it's something that I fall back on because it's what I've been doing for a very long time. And even though I know it's unhealthy, it still, in a way, helps to soothe me because it's comfortable, because it's what I know to do. So again, it's asking yourself or asking that person, what is the purpose of the behavior? And it could be because of, and we're going to skip a little bit to the HALT coping strategy. It could be because I'm hungry and I just forgot to eat. I know that happens to a lot of us, right? We are so focused on what we're doing. We're focused on whatever it is that we're doing and we forget to eat. Or sometimes you do it on purpose.
Mm-hmm. And I know when you say that, I know our listeners are probably saying, oh my gosh, that can't be, that's so simple. But it really goes back to trying to really understand your emotions. And what, it probably sounds simple, what did I eat last, or I'm hungry, but allow also that you stay in tune to what is that emotion that's going on to allow that to happen, because there's some reason. So is it something that you were bullied from, being at school or something? Because eventually if it continues to happen, then it turns into something more.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, one of the things that the pandemic has done is, and I was actually reading some articles about this, students, whether at university or K through 12, they're struggling to get food.
Yes.
And so, sometimes it might be that I didn't eat because I don't have food and I don't have the money or I don't have a place to go eat. And so again, as mental health providers, those are things that, we need to explore, we need to look at, we need to, again, talk about that elephant in the room. And if that is the issue, what are some community resources that could help out with that?
Absolutely. And I think that's where we have to encourage these people that are suffering from self-harm is, what are the resources that are out there? What are the resources that are available? That's the first step.
Absolutely. And then let's say that you just ate, so your tummy's kind of full. That's maybe not it. So angry. Am I angry or am I hangry? If you're hangry, that's a lethal combination. But angry, what are you dealing with right now that is stressful? For most of us, there's always going to be at least one or more things that are stressing us out. Right? So let's talk about what is that stressful thing. Is the stress what's making you angry? And if it is, talk about it. Call somebody that is going to actually be in a place and in a mental space and a mindset that they're able to listen without any judgment and will be supportive. Whether it's the first time that you're calling about this stressful thing or whether it's the 100th time that you're calling about this stressful thing, it's calling someone. If you're not able to call someone, journal it. And journaling, I think that when we think about journaling, it's I have to sit down and write down. Actually, there are so many ways to journal. You can journal in the traditional sense. You can also, there's an app for it. Obviously, there's an app for it. There's actually, I don't know if you guys were aware, there is a website that all it is for you to journal. And it's your own personal journal. Nobody reads it, so it's not blogging, it's actually journaling. So find what works for you, because it doesn't, again, have to be in the traditional sense. It's just what works for you. And I know that, as clinicians, we've been taught, okay, if you're angry, there's usually a secondary underlying emotion to that anger, right? So let's explore that. Why are you really angry? Are you hurt? Are you scared? Are you blank, 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 right? So let's talk about it. Again, with someone that will be not non-judgmental and is able to listen to you. Are you lonely? This has happened to everyone. Everybody that was an extrovert had to become an introvert.
Yes, that is
And
true.
so many people have struggled with this. I know that things are opening up. California is actually one of the states that is still struggling to open up completely, but I know that there are other states where things are a lot more open.
Mhm.
But if you're lonely, social media is probably not the best place to go look for friends, or the best option for you to work through your loneliness. Usually, that social interaction, in-person social interaction, is the best. However, if you're going to a social media channel that is positive, that is going to be a positive for you, then absolutely a great idea. But ultimately, it's about making that in-person social interaction with someone.
Not to mention, we're also looking at what we've been going through these last 2 years is, the social distancing. It has caused a great amount of loneliness throughout, all of our generations because it looks completely different. So, with COVID-19 coming in and taking effect, it has further decreased the support for the students to have, if we're looking at students, and for them to potentially even enter into risk of, self-harm. And so I think we need to look at how do we start to actually increase the support system for our peers. I think that is so important because they have been left alone. They have been doing, things virtually, that some of it is, not to mention, some of our faculty, they were thrown right into this virtual setting. And with it being unknown, and for our students, that you mentioned our social media, they're whizzes at social media. So while they're ready for immediate action, they're still starting to draw more and more lonely because some of them are just bored. Some of them are losing interest. Some of them are losing their motivation. And so this is when they step in and they also try to find ways to be able to cope with the pressures of the changes. And so some of them rely or convert to, once again, self-harm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for a good social media channel, we encourage you to start following us because we do a lot of positive motivational stuff, at least on a daily basis. Iwan is amazing with us about doing that. So, look for it. There's a lot of positive in social media. Sometimes you don't have to look that far. So, and then the last one, am I tired? And a lot of it doesn't necessarily even have to be like physical tiredness. It could be emotional tiredness.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Connor, you mentioned, you're just tired of being tired.
Mm-hmm.
And how significant that is.
And I think when you identify that you're being tired, just, think of something different that you can do. We always say, we say it and we continue to do that same dance and, we get no results. And so when we get no results, that's when we kind of convert to, how do we start to, feel again? How do we start to really fit in and feel like we're a part of being? And not still centered in that tiredness. So then it leads us to kind of just feeling that sense of loneliness, that motivation leaves, and I call it apathy, because we're no longer, we're losing our motivation. A lot of our students are probably turning that loss of motivation, that loss of interest, into feeling depressed because they feel like their moods are very low. They feel like they don't have the energy to do anything. And so I think we just need to look at it. What are some of the coping strategies that we can do to start to put some of these things back in place so that they can start to feel fulfilled?
And we do invite you all to put in the chat or raise your hand if you do have some coping strategies that you'd like to share with us. We're definitely open to that. But it is important to realize when we are feeling tired. I know that when I feel tired, everything just seems overwhelming. Everything just seems tiny little problems have now turned into something huge because I'm not able to function at my full capacity, right? And if on top of being tired, I'm hungry, again, very bad combination. And self-care, how important is self-care? I know that we've done several webinars about what self-care is, and they are in our YouTube channel, and we're going to continue to do self-care talks, but definitely self-care. I feel that self-care is something so personal, so intimate, that you need to take the time, you need to invest the time in finding out what works for you, right? Because as clinicians, we have a list of kind of like, hey, these could work for everyone, but in reality, what actually works for you? And the good thing about self-care is that it's a very organic activity, it's a very organic practice. So, maybe what worked for you 3 months ago isn't working now, and that's okay. It's okay to find a new thing. It's okay to explore. It's okay to maybe try that thing that you had been thinking about trying. Maybe this is your moment. Go do it. Absolutely. So,
like a lot of them, someone said just building a puzzle, listening to music, doing exercising, those are all key elements. Breathing exercises, yoga is also mentioned in the text. But when we also look at, these are great things for self-care, but we can also just say that everything that we're going through, guess what? We've been strong enough and we've made it through it. And so I think when we identify that, I think we're starting to put affirmations into place and just say that everything that we've been through, we've made it through it. And eventually some of these things are going to go away. And so when I think we can start to speak that positive language, we start to move towards that. But I think we first need to recognize how far we have come. And then when we have that energy, then we can get out and we can start to do that yoga. We can start to walk, but we have to put in that work to be able to identify the painful situations that you've been through. And then how do you become aware to let you know that you have survived it?
Absolutely. And one thing about this worksheet, we are providing it to everyone that signed up for this webinar. We encourage you, you can use it for yourself. You can use it with people that you work with. You can share it. We give you permission to use it how you see best. But let's open it up to questions. Does anyone have any questions for any one of us? Or even something that you'd like to share just with everyone? You can either put it in the chat or you can raise your hand. Wow, we did a great job. If no one has any questions, then awesome.
Yeah. But I would, Dr. Moriella, before I know people are saying thank you. And so I would like to recognize that one of the other coping strategies that I would like, if you have, if you have a son or a daughter, a neighbor, a relative or friend that is struggling with self-harm, and one of the coping strategies that I always use is to allow yourself, it's called the 15-minute rule. And so allow yourself 15 minutes to just sit still and not do anything. And I think after 15 minutes, it starts to change your thought patterns. It starts to kind of change your mood. It starts to change how you react. And so if you can keep in mind, do that 15-minute rule, allow yourself to just halt for 15 minutes. And then once you do it, it distracts that urge. And then be ready to know what is it that you're moving towards that's positive.
Well, and a lot of people put meditation as well. There are
Mhm.
so many avenues for, if you don't want to come up with meditation on your own, or you're struggling with some direction for meditation. There's so many places that you can go. YouTube is a huge and amazing resources that has a lot of really good meditation videos. There are actually free apps. For instance, Calm is a really, really great one. Netflix actually has some really good stuff as well. Particularly, they even have like a sleep meditation. I think it's through Headspace
Mhm.
that provides it. HBO, I don't know if you guys knew that HBO and Calm partnered and actually have a series. I think it's about 8 episodes. It's amazing. I've watched it and I'm like, oh, I feel better already. So
Right.
definitely there are many ways that if you're looking for a meditation, a guided meditation, that you can reach out and just find it at your
Right.
fingertips.
I know one had mentioned, I work with minors and I'm new to mental health. What is one way to start the conversation, the challenging conversation of the elephant in the room? And, I always like to start off with, let them know that you're there for them. And so I think when you're able to build that relationship, and kind of join with them, you never want to force them to try to change or to try to talk about it if they're not ready, but you do want to allow them to have control or say over them as you being a support system. And so then how does that look? Then you can kind of allow them to tell what are some of their positive qualities. And everyone has positive qualities. And so I think if you start to recognize and hear what they're saying about their positive qualities, then you can start those challenging conversations and say, well, what got you here to this place? What got you thinking about, some of your challenges? And then that's probably when they're going to share their story. But I think it's always safe, so that there's no triggers to start off to, what are some of your positive qualities?
I think another thing that we also do need to point out is that as mental health providers, we also need to take care of our own mental health. Um,
Yes.
if
Mhm.
we are triggered during these conversations, it's okay to take
Right.
a break. In fact, it's happened to me. Sometimes I'm like, hey, why don't we do a meditation together?
Mhm.
Because while it's helping the client, it's also helping me. Lori
Totally.
Williams put a really amazing strategy that I've used as well. Have a student listen to their favorite song and wait to act on it
Yes.
until it's over.
Mhm.
That's an amazing strategy. Thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
that, Lori. But yeah, it's okay. In fact, and I forget who I was watching, but I was watching a video where the clinician was saying, sometimes when we get triggered, sometimes when we feel that our emotions are bubbling up, it's okay to tell the client, you know what? I just need to take a deep breath. So take a deep breath
Yeah.
with me,
Mhm.
because we're human too. We do get triggered. We do
Yes.
have those difficult moments, and it's okay to acknowledge them. It's okay to even try to or even do your coping skills with the client, because not only are you showing them how to do a coping skill, you're teaching them.
That's
It's a
correct.
huge teachable moment, which
Mhm.
is going to make more of an impact than you telling them to do something.
Absolutely. We have what's called a positivity bench. And so I actually walk out, it's outdoors in front of our library. And I walk out with the students and we actually sit on the positivity bench and we start to explore ways that we can actually replace some of that distorted thinking and make it more positive. And then, so as we start to focus on that, then we start to kind of get more in depth with some of those challenges. And so they're able to say, oh, I can do this. And so when you actually have something in place that, where it starts off, it's positive, it kind of allows you to stay in in that area, which is good, kind of like meditation. You know, we can
Absolutely.
teach meditation all day long. There's so many different breathing techniques that I would suggest everyone try using. Sometimes it doesn't work the first time. If it becomes a habit, it eventually changes.
You know, one that I found that hopefully people know about, it's very well known, is a progressive muscle relaxation
Mhm.
meditation. It's amazing. I have, like you mentioned, the first time that I did it, I was like, I don't know about this, but everybody's talking about it, so of course
Right,
I'm gonna try it again.
right. Yeah,
And it is one of those meditations where it's kind of uncomfortable, but then I saw the benefit of it. And, you know, some nights when I struggle to go to sleep, I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this meditation, whether in my head or whether, you know, I pull it up on my phone or whatever it might be. But definitely, you brought up a really good point. Maybe meditation isn't your thing, it can become your thing. But here's what we want to think about: any type of change is uncomfortable,
mhm,
right? Until it's not.
right.
So again, explore, give yourself freedom and permission to try different types of self-care, different ways to take care, not just of your mental health, but also your physical health, your spiritual health. Especially, you know, at Restore, we definitely believe in the connection between the mind, body, and the spirit. If one is struggling, everything is struggling.
Struggling, right. Another one, last, is your safe place imagery. And so what is your happy space? What is your happy memory? And so when you can identify that happy memory, that becomes your safe place imagery. And that's something that you can always bring to yourself in times of when you're feeling, disconnected, or if you're feeling, isolated, if you're feeling lonely, even if you're exhibiting some angriness. Take yourself to that place. Take yourself to that happy space, and then it will allow you to immediately become connected and be able to identify, even if it's a holiday, if it's Thanksgiving with friends, take yourself to that space so that you can start to think about that, or even sometimes move towards it when you're struggling.
And you know, just like James mentioned in the chat, the ways will never stop. Absolutely, just like we have
Mhm.
moments of happiness and excitement and pleasure. Pleasure is very important, by the way. Joy. We also have moments of sadness, of anger, of those uncomfortable emotions. And just like waves, they come and they go. Um, and you know, by doing these coping strategies, it's not about not dealing with the feeling, it's about being able to deal with the feeling in a more productive and constructive way when your mind is calmer, right? When you are in a mindset to be able to process and work through the feeling. So just do want to make that very clear.
Yes.
Um, so Yvonne, you want to tell us when we're going to be having Dr. Connor on again? Because I've had an amazing conversation with you and everyone that's listening
Yes,
to
I
this.
enjoyed everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Connor. It's been a wonderful time learning with you and sharing with wonderful people about this important topic of mental health, which is self-care. I know I learned a lot, and I hope that all of you learn with me. Dr. Connor will be with us again in the month of June, so keep your eyes in our channels of social media, and also Eventbrite will keep sharing information tomorrow. When we share the recording in email form, we'll send you more updates in the future. So thank you all for being here, and we hope that we have you in the near future. I hope that you all have a very nice afternoon or evening for most of us. Most of us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.